Healing in a toxic or unhealthy household can be done. I have done it, and I'm still doing it. I'm continuing to do it, and it has completely changed the trajectory of my life. So I know it can be done, and I'm here to give you the tips on how you can do it. Hi, beautiful souls. We're gonna dive right into today's video because this is gonna be a long one. So if you want, grab some tea, grab some water, grab whatever, a snack maybe, because we're gonna be here for a while. And something I want to add before we start this video as a bit of a disclaimer is that this video is not to replace traditional therapy or whatever, and it's also not a coping mechanism video on how to survive in a toxic household, but rather it's a solution-based video on how you can heal out of that position. First, I want to break down the difference between a toxic household and an unhealthy household, because I hear on the internet a lot nowadays the word toxic family being thrown around, but for many people, their household or their family is not toxic, it's unhealthy. And I'm not excusing that unhealthy behavior, but there is a difference, and the way you deal with the toxic household or family versus a unhealthy household or family is going to look slightly different, especially for the unhealthy household and family. If you do fit into the toxic household or family, then there's definitely going to be a lot of benefit to watching this video in its entirety, because the section on unhealthy families and households will still apply to you. Whereas if you live in an unhealthy household or family, the section on toxic households and families is probably not going to apply very much. At the end of this video, I'm going to be answering some of the common questions I get while on coaching calls and stuff. So stay tuned to that, and maybe some of your questions will be answered there. And lastly, before we start, I want to also say that living in a toxic household or an unhealthy household is not an excuse to not start your inner work journey or to not continue to up-level and work on yourself. If you use it as an excuse and hide behind it, then you're never going to get out of that cycle. Even if your physical environment changes, those things will still follow you around. So don't use it as an excuse, but rather use it as a tool to strengthen you. Before I start diving into the different types of households and what differentiates a toxic household and an unhealthy household, I wanted to add a few things that you're going to have to accept when you live in this environment and you're on your healing journey. You cannot help those who do not want your help, who do not want to help themselves. You cannot help people by forcing them to change. And just because you want to help them, it doesn't matter. It's about whether they want to help themselves or not. If somebody wants to help themselves, they will seek the resources that they need in order to help themselves. So don't feel bad or guilty or feel like you need to help those around you if they are not willing or wanting that help. Everyone has their own journey in life, and these journeys look very different. So even if someone's journey might be taking them down a clearly unhealthy or toxic path and it's hurting them and you can see it, learn to be okay with that. Because maybe there's something in that journey that they need to experience. And maybe that experience will help catapult them into their healing journey or somewhere else. Some people just don't want to, and that's okay too. They don't have to heal. They don't have to be their best version. If they do not want to, that is completely their choice. It is completely okay for them not to want to heal and just for them to stay where they are. It may not work for you, and you can distance yourself from them, but that doesn't mean that just because you are healing and you are up leveling and you are doing your inner work and trying to be your best version, that they also have to do that. There are always going to be people in your life that may not like the changes that they see in you. People who have maybe known you for a long time, and now all of a sudden you're setting boundaries and you're not accepting poor behavior, or simply you're just happy, like you've released your baggage, so you're freer, you feel lighter, you feel happier, and because of that your life starts to change dramatically. There will still be people in your life who don't like that, who don't want that for you, and that's okay. With peace and love, let them go. They don't need to be in your life. And if it's a family member, you can just distance yourself as much as possible from them, or simply stop sharing the good things that are happening in your life. And if you feel like sharing them, go ahead, still share them. Like, what difference does it make? If they want to pout and be upset, that's on them. But don't drag yourself down just because you feel that everyone has to support you or everyone has to be in your corner in order for you to be happy or fulfilled or whatever. There is bound to be some tension in your family and your household as you start to change and start to up level. These things are unfortunately unavoidable. And that tension is actually a good thing because it will help you grow. You know, a diamond needs lots of pressure in order to become a diamond. So under that pressure is how you will also grow. It's okay that there's tension. It will kind of resolve itself as you move through. And even if the tension still occurs from the other person's end, as long as you are grounded in yourself and you've done your work, it really won't matter. You can love your family and still understand that they are not good for you, and still understand that they are not in a healthy place. You can still have love for them. You can still extend that love to them and understand that, you know, just because they're in this unhealthy place doesn't mean you have to sit in that boat with them. You can love them from a distance, and you can just understand that, you know, you're simply not aligned. And if they decide to up level and change their lives around and start to release that baggage of their past, then they will come into alignment with you. And at that point, you can make your decisions. Understanding this part is actually really big. You also play a role in your environment. The environment that you live in, so your household, is not just the other people in it, it's also you. Everyone contributes to the environment in the household. So you need to ask yourself, what inside of me is also contributing to this behaviors and these situations in my household, in my environment? Because you are also contributing to that in some way. And I know that can sometimes be really like triggering and hard to hear, but you need to hear it. And if it triggers you, then explore it. That's a good thing. You want to be triggered, because by exploring that trigger, you're going to learn more and be able to dive deeper into yourself. And you'll be able to actually change and impact that environment to make it better, to make it less unhealthy, to reduce your contribution to that. And eventually you'll be able to move away from that physically and emotionally, so you're no longer carrying the baggage of that as well and seeing the same patterns repeat in your life in other areas. And lastly, it is not your responsibility to help anyone heal. Each individual is responsible for themselves to heal and work through their own issues. Now, if somebody comes to you and is willing to do the work to heal and to put that effort in because they genuinely want to, that's a completely different story. But it's not your responsibility to go out there and to basically try to force people to heal and change. Of course, you can always give suggestions, you can always give resources, but as somebody who truly wants to heal and up level and just release that baggage will find the resources. They will come to you. They will ask you for help because they see that you have changed. They see that you have gotten better. That something in your life is different. Your energy is different. They will see that and they will come to you. They will seek the resources. And I want to also add this. If somebody comes to you for advice and you give them solid advice, and you know that if they took this advice, things in their life would drastically change, and they don't, and you see them continuing to do the things that are hurting them, release it and let it go. Because at the end of the day, maybe they still are not ready to receive your advice. Maybe they are not ready yet. So with compassion and understanding, let them be. Do not take it personally, because sometimes the advice can be great, but we're just not ready for it. In that moment, we are not ready to receive it. We're not ready to start acting on that advice. And that's okay. Again, everybody's journey is different, and we just have to follow our own journey. So give the advice if you feel called to it, and let it go. It's none of your business whether that person acts on it or not. So an unhealthy household is one where the intentions are good, where there's care, where there's love, but there is just ignorance and wounds from their past that make it so they don't know how to communicate, how to show up in a healthy manner, where they're not making the best decisions. They're hurting you, but unintentionally hurting you. They don't really understand that what they're doing is causing problems, is not causing solutions, or not creating solutions. A toxic household, on the other hand, is where there is malicious intent. There is intent to hurt. That there are extremely deep wounds, and through these deep wounds, that person is looking to hurt you. That person is looking to place that wound on you. They want to hurt you, to make themselves feel a little bit better. I'm not going to dive too deep into like an example on this, but the recent Nickelodeon stuff going on is a great example. There's like people in that industry who are genuinely looking to hurt others out of malicious intent. And then there are others who maybe have been hurt or see this as normal. This is what they grew up in, and they normalize it. And through their normalizing, they're not actually looking to hurt somebody, but they unintentionally end up hurting people. So that is the difference. It all boils down to intention. And of course, sometimes these lines can be blurred. Sometimes you can have a really toxic household where there's fighting, there's aggressive behaviors, there's cursing, there's all sorts of like attacking type things happening, violent type behaviors that can cause that household environment to feel toxic, even if the intention is not to hurt. Because maybe this is how they grew up, maybe whatever, this is what they've learned. Even if that intention may not be to hurt, if it's that excessive and aggressive, then it is a toxic household. And in those cases, that's why I say for the toxic household, people who feel they are in a toxic household, watch this entire video, because there are going to be helpful points in this whole video for you. So this portion of the video is going to be specifically for unhealthy households. So how do you go about this? How do you go about healing from this? How do you go about dealing with the stress that comes from living in an unhealthy household while you're trying to heal and up-level? One of the starting ways is by shifting your perspective to see it as a blessing rather than a curse. Start to be grateful for it, because that will immediately shift your mindset. And I would even suggest that every night before bed, or even every morning after you wake up, or both, write 10 things that you are grateful for. And if you can't think of 10 things, then just start with 3. Write down 3 things that you're grateful for and genuinely feel that gratitude to those things. That could be grateful for this new day, grateful for whatever that looks like for you. By doing this over time, I'd say in a month, you'll start to see huge differences in your mindset. You'll start to see that you're no longer looking at these instances of being triggered or these unhealthy situations as a bad thing, but rather you're starting to look and find the opportunities in it, the thing to be grateful for it. Your mind just starts to shift and automatically starts to look for the positive in that situation. Even if it is a really unfortunate situation, you can learn to accept that, you know what, it wasn't the best situation, but your mind will still start to see but you know, I can learn from this, or X, Y, and Z. I personally feel like living in these environments is sometimes incredibly beneficial because it helps you explore your own triggers, and it gives you that opportunity to almost catapult and quantum leap yourself in your healing journey. You're basically cutting out so much because of the environment you grew up in. Sure, it's definitely not glorious or great. You know, it can be really, really stressful sometimes living in these environments. However, when you start to look at it as an opportunity to explore deeper into yourself, explore your triggers, and quantum leap yourself in your healing journey, it becomes a little bit easier to deal with that stress. Observe the people. Once you understand that they're not attacking you, that they don't know any better, you get the opportunity to observe them. And through observing them, you'll learn so much more about yourself. And by exploring and diving into each trigger that comes up and releasing it, you're basically freeing yourself from baggage that maybe you accumulated through your childhood, that you may have accumulated through other people's experiences by hearing them, listening to them, or being around them, or that you carried, if you believe it, spiritually, that you carried energetically through your different lives that may have been passed down to you from the previous generations, from your mother and from your other ancestors. One thing you really have to do is stay away from gossip and drama. Limit the amount of gossip and drama you are allowing yourself to consume. Because the more gossip, the more drama you consume, the more it's going to show up in your life. Remember, you are what you consume. And I know that that saying is oftentimes used like you are what you eat, but everything you consume is who you become. So if you're consuming drama and gossip, whether that's through the content you watch, the people you hang out with, or the other media and other sources of information that you're constantly looking at, guess what you're going to find more in your life? You're going to find more gossip and drama and chaos in your life. So in your household environment, you're going to contribute more to that type of thing. And in an unhealthy household environment, that's only going to expand. That's what I've noticed. I used to watch a lot of drama content, YouTube content, and even sometimes it was like labeled as comedy and funny, but it was still drama. And I used to consume so much of that. And then I would wonder why in my family, I felt like I was constantly being roped into their drama, constantly being roped into their gossip, into their unhealthy behavioral patterns. Once I stopped consuming that content, that type of information, a massive shift happened. And in that massive shift, I finally stopped having chaotic experiences or dramatic experiences in my family. Sure, they do their things. Sure, they have their unhealthy habits, behaviors, and whatnot. But I was no longer involved in it. I was separate from it. So if they were having a fight or a disagreement or an argument or whatever, I was no longer being roped into it. And sometimes what would end up happening is somehow I leave the room for whatever reason, or I'm not there, and these things happen. It's almost like I'm being removed from that environment when something like that is about to happen. Each time you are triggered, explore it. And in my journaling video, I give you a 4-step process on how to explore your triggers. Go through that process. It will be incredibly beneficial. And afterwards, you can decide how to respond. So catch yourself when you are triggered. Do not just react. Start to catch yourself. Each time you're triggered, catch yourself. Go through your own releasing, exploring process, and then decide how to respond. So that may look like in the moment somebody says something to you in your household. Maybe they say, maybe they insult you. Maybe you tried something new and it didn't turn out that great, and they insult your ability, whatever it was. In that moment, instead of reacting like you are accustomed to reacting, whether that's shying away or maybe crying or taking it personally or whatever, however you are accustomed to reacting, instead of doing that, catch yourself in that moment. So this requires a lot of conscious awareness, and living in an unhealthy and even a toxic household requires a large amount of conscious awareness in order to heal from it, in order to heal and to release baggages while living in it. You have to become highly consciously aware of what you're doing, your actions, the way you're showing up. So the best thing to do in that situation is to take a step back and observe that trigger. Go through that 4-step process and then respond. Maybe your response is you let it go, because maybe it's not worth your energy invested into it. Maybe your response is you go and talk to that person and you let them know, hey, you know what? I didn't appreciate when you said that. But now when you talk to them, because you've already released your trigger, it's no longer coming across as you barking at them, so to speak, or you attacking them. It's more coming from a place of understanding how it made you feel, and now you're simply explaining to them. And I've noticed for myself that when I've done this, that person is more likely to be aware the next time that happens. And they're not, now this doesn't always happen, but they're less likely to insult you again, or they're less likely to do that same thing again. And maybe they'll apologize because now they realize that, oh, I didn't understand that I was actually hurting her when I said this. So they're more likely to apologize, and you can move forward. There's no tension, no harsh feelings, no silent treatment or hot and coldness. Like, none of that is here. It's a simple, I've done my work. I realized that this triggered me, why it triggered me. I released it and I chose to respond accordingly. Moving on from that, you need to learn how to become comfortable doing things alone, completely alone. That means sitting there by yourself, doing nothing. Stop distracting yourself. If you are able to be completely alone in your presence without distractions, you start to become more and more comfortable with your own presence. And once you become comfortable with your own presence, you're no longer going to accept poor behavior from other people just so you can have somebody around you. Because now you're comfortable being alone. You don't need that other person. You don't need to be distracted. you're not embarrassed to be alone. And so the people that you attract in your life, you can decide whether you want them in your life or not. Because either they meet your standards and you keep them in your life, or they don't and you let them go and there's no harsh feelings. This is really important. I know it doesn't seem entirely related to living in an unhealthy environment, but it is, because maybe part of you wants to keep these people around in your life simply because you're too afraid to be alone with your own self without distractions. So maybe the chaos, the fighting, the whatever unhealthiness has become a distraction. And so on some level, you feel like you need this distraction. Otherwise, you'll have to face your real demons. You'll really have to face yourself, and that might be scaring you. So it is related to living in an unhealthy household. You need to get comfortable facing your demons, facing you, all of you, completely raw, without distractions. Anything can be a distraction. Scrolling on your phone can be a distraction, obviously. But other smaller things can be a distraction too. Even creating, maybe you like to paint, maybe you like to draw, maybe you like to do whatever, I don't know. Those things can also be a distraction if you're not giving yourself the time to truly just sit there and do absolutely nothing. And just be present with yourself. Allow the thoughts to come up. Allow those things to come up. That's kind of what meditation is all about. The more you do this, the more comfortable you become in your own presence, sitting with your own energy. And again, then you're not available. You're not looking to keep people around just to distract yourself. You're no longer available to engage in unhealthy environments just because it's keeping you away from facing the things that you don't want to face in your life, facing all of you. Something that I commonly get asked, and that I've also experienced in my own life, is what do you do when somebody throws an insult at you in your house? Like throws shade at you, throws some type of insult. You know, it could be like calling you dumb or some other name, you know. And for so many years, that's the way that's the dynamic you have built with the members in your household. And now, because you understand, because you're up-leveling, you're no longer okay with this. You're no longer available for it, but yet it keeps happening to you. How do you deal with it? What do you do? Well, if it's triggering you, this is what I've learned. If it triggers you, then on some level, you believe what's being told to you. Or there's some type of wound associated with it. So again, the first thing you need to do is explore that. Why are you being triggered? Go through that process and release it. Next, how do you respond? You don't respond. You pull your energy away. You simply don't respond. That's not the same as the silent treatment. The silent treatment is completely going cold on that person. No, that's not what we're doing here. What you do instead is you pull back your energy. You still remain yourself. You still talk to them like normal, but you simply don't respond to them when they insult you or when they throw shade at you. You just don't respond. You act like you act like you don't hear it, and you move on. And if it's triggering you, again, you do your own releasing processes. But when because I experience this all the time in my family, the throwing shade, it's definitely reduced on a massive level now. But it still happens, and I can't control other people, and neither can you. So what do? The only thing you can control is your own reaction or your own response. So just don't respond. Pretend like it didn't happen, and ignore it and move on. It becomes easier to ignore when you've dealt with that trigger. Because if it's still triggering you, it's going to be a lot more difficult to ignore. You won't be able to ignore it. It's still going to keep coming up in your mind. Even if on the surface you ignored it, it's going to keep playing in your head. So you have to explore that trigger. And once you do, and once you release it, you may think about it, but it's no longer eliciting that same response. So you're not constantly replaying that in your head. That person, it's their problem. If they choose to speak like that, that's on them. And you're able to just move on. Have a why. Why do you want to heal? Why do you want better for yourself? Why do you want to up level and change your life? Have a strong why that is going to ground you in these moments of being triggered or being insulted or dealing with situations that come up in an unhealthy household environment. Have a strong and solid why that is going to keep you grounded so you're not being whisked away every time something happens in your household or something unhealthy occurs. Energetic barriers are so important. I cannot tell you how many times I've set energetic barriers and instantly almost things change. For example, somebody from my family, like I could be cooking, somebody comes up and is, looking at what I'm doing or staring at, like almost just looking over my shoulder, like at what I'm doing. In that moment, I can feel like they're judging me or whatever. But if I set an energetic barrier that I'm not available to sit here and be consumed by this overanalyzation of whether or not they're judging me or judging my food or whatever, I create that energetic barrier, that person walks away. And it is just mind-blowing to see how this happens. Like, they literally just walk away and they're not there anymore. And on top of that, I realized that why am I assuming that they're judging me? Maybe they're looking, maybe they want to learn, maybe they're observing me. Who knows what they're doing? I cannot make that assumption. So once I create that barrier, I place that barrier around me, not only do they move away, but I also recognize that I'm not available to be triggered in that moment by something like that based on an assumption. I don't know why they're sitting there looking at my food or looking at me cooking. I don't know. So I'm not going to assume. But energetic barriers are amazing. It's a great way to keep your energy and your almost like your energy in a bubble of protection. So other people's drama, their negativity, their whatever is bouncing off of you. You're not internalizing it. That is why I genuinely love every morning I place a energetic barrier around me that only the highest, purest, loving forms of light energy vibrating at the frequencies of love, enlightenment, wholeness, peace, and joy can enter. Everything else bounces back. And that has served me so well. I just love that feeling. It's like a warmth that spreads and I can see my bubble around me. If you believe in that stuff, try it. There's no harm in trying it. Every time a trigger comes up or somebody says something, remind yourself in that moment that you have invested so much. You have invested so much into yourself, into up-leveling, into healing, into being your best self, that you're not available to drop yourself down. Of course, explore that trigger, but in that moment, remind yourself of that. Remind yourself that these things are not worth dropping yourself down. And if you slip up, it's okay. It's not a big deal. There's always next time. If you slip up and you have a reaction, there's been plenty of times where even though I knew I needed to not react, even though I was aware that in that moment I was being triggered, I ended up reacting. But I will take a step back later on and recognize that, all right, I reacted and that wasn't right. How can I do better next time? Because that's all that it is. It's not like we cannot sit here and guilt ourselves or hurt ourselves or shame ourselves for having reactions. It happens. Shit happens. Move on. It's one of those types of things. So it's totally okay if it happens. Just try to do better next time. The biggest thing to learn in this environment is to observe objectively, like a third party. Observe the people around you. Observe why they're behaving that way. Like I said, I realized that the reason people in my family have a tendency to throw insults and shade is because that's how they've learned to connect with others. They've learned that through that, they can have this relationship. That's how they've learned to form relationships. And to them, they don't see anything wrong with it. They think it's perfectly normal. So by observing that, it's less, it doesn't feel as personal. It doesn't feel like a personal attack. I just realized that this is how they talk to people. This is how they connect with people. This is all that they know, how to form relationships. And through that knowledge, I can let go of that hurt that I might have been holding on to for so many years. And lastly, in this unhealthy environment, you have to learn how to forgive. This is something that I, for so long, put off. I was holding on to this grudge for so long, even though I knew that my family members meant no harm and they had no ill intention. This grudge had become part of my life, part of my identity. So I was holding on to it, trying so hard to make sure it stayed alive, without realizing that I was constantly hurting myself. So I had to forgive, and it was huge and massively changed my life and the way I show up in my family and in that environment. I didn't realize that the reason I was still experiencing all these things, these unhealthy situations, these fights, this drama, this chaos, is because I was holding on to unforgiveness, because I had not yet forgiven. And it was that one little thing. Seems so small, but it was so huge in its impact. So I tell you that you have to forgive too. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but at some point you are going to have to forgive and move on. Because if you don't, you will just continue to see these patterns and cycles repeated in your life. Things will physically change, but your life may not seem to change. The experiences you draw in may not seem to change. You may reduce the amount of fights that you have, but for whatever reason, you're still ending up in these situations, these fights, these petty fights and arguments, and you don't see why you still end up in them. It's because you're still holding on to a grudge. You're still holding on to unforgiveness. You have to forgive, and you have to let go. It's not easy. Sometimes it's probably the hardest thing that you can do, is to forgive. But it needs to be done. So if you feel like you have put in so much work, that you've up-leveled yourself, you've done so much healing, you've released so much baggage, and yet you're still being dragged into these unhealthy situations in your household, ask yourself if you have truly forgiven either yourself or someone else, or maybe both, because oftentimes if we haven't forgiven somebody else, we haven't forgiven ourselves yet either. So ask yourself that, explore that, because that could be the missing link. Shift your focus away from that external environment and put it back onto yourself. Because the more you focus on yourself and your energy, the less energy you feed to that unhealthy household and unhealthy environment. And so it doesn't keep growing. The only way this unhealthy environment is growing is because people keep feeding into it. So if you pull your energy away and put it back on you, and you stop to feed into that, or you stop feeding into that, it reduces. That unhealthy environment slowly starts to taper off. Of course, there's other people involved, and you cannot control those other people and what they choose to do. But by simply removing your energy from it, you're no longer being placed in that environment when it is that way. You're no longer in the thick of things, so to speak. And you'll no longer need to find an escape, a distraction from your environment, which is only just keeping you from actually healing, but you'll genuinely be removed from that environment. So you're not trying to escape it only to end up in another situation. You're actually just being removed. So those situations aren't following you. And an example of this is for a family member that I know who had this situation was a toxic situation, extremely toxic household. They sought to escape that toxic household through marriage. They got married, thought that the family would be really good, is a great family, only to realize that family was an extremely toxic household as well. And so each time this person had tried to escape their toxic environment, they ended up in another situation. And this applies for both, for an unhealthy environment and a toxic environment. Of course, if there's heavy abuse, you need to leave. You shouldn't be staying in an environment that is heavily abusive and causing you to spiral. But at some point, even if you do leave, you need to recognize that you will have to deal with those issues. That if you just allow them to linger in the background, things are just going to keep popping up in your life. Now we're going to be moving on to the toxic side of, or the toxic household, and how to deal with that. So for those of you who have a toxic household environment, firstly, I will say, watch the unhealthy version or the unhealthy section, because it might help you. And if not, at least skip back 20-30 seconds to hear what I had to say about the toxic household environment. I want to start it off by saying this: there's always a ray of light, always a sliver of hope, that ray of light coming in. And so long as you can focus on that, your journey through this will be so much easier. Not to say that it's going to be incredibly easy like a walk through the park, but it'll make it a little bit easier, because now your focus is on that light. It's on that hope. And when you have that hope, when you focus on that light, you will naturally attract into your life things to help you overcome your situation. So again, heavy toxic abuse, you should not be staying in it. Leave. That there's no other way to put it. I understand the situations, and everybody's lives have different situations occurring in it, but being in a heavy toxic and abusive environment will do so much more damage to your psyche, to you as an individual. So if you can, I would strongly recommend leaving that behind. And if you really, really can't, then try to find somebody to help you through it, a professional. Try speaking to somebody. Again, this video is not a replacement for therapy or any of this professional help. I'm simply giving my experiences and the things that have helped me in my journey, and hoping that it will help you. The first thing to ask yourself is, what inside of you is keeping you chained to this toxic environment? Explore that deeply, because there's something inside of you that is keeping you chained to this environment. And why? An example from my family is my grandma lived in an exceedingly toxic household. She was abused and poorly treated. It was really, really bad. What inside of her, though, she felt she had nobody else. She felt like she could get no better than this. The reason she stayed in that toxic environment was because she felt like she had nobody to support her, and that she couldn't support herself. Now, this was a really different time and era where, the majority of women were not working, and didn't really have a means to financially support themselves. And for her, she felt her parents couldn't support her, that she didn't have anybody to support her. And so she stayed in that environment because she felt she couldn't do any better, that this was the best she's going to get. And so that fear kept her in this toxic environment. And that's something you'll have to ask yourself. What is chaining you to this environment? What beliefs are you holding on to? What inside of you are you holding on to that is chaining you here? Because many times those chains are just limiting beliefs that we have formulated in our mind. It's not always real. Now, there are obviously certain limitations that are real, that are from our physical environment, that are chaining us down. But by exploring this, you may be able to come up with solutions on how you can free yourself from these chains. This is also where therapy and coaching and things like that can really come in handy, because you're able to talk to somebody and gain an outsider's perspective on your situation. Many times when we are in a toxic environment, it is so much more difficult for us to step back and observe. And because it becomes a little bit more difficult to step back and observe, that third party help or perspective can be so beneficial to opening our eyes. If you can, try spending less time in that toxic environment. Go out, meet with people you trust, meet with people you feel safe with, safe in the sense that you don't feel like you're coming to harm, because sometimes our minds can learn to feel safe in a toxic environment. And if that's the case for you, then there's deeper exploration that will need to happen in order to break that feeling of safety in that toxic environment. Inner child healing will be incredibly beneficial, because oftentimes the chains that we have keeping us to this toxic environment can't come from our inner child, from our childhood. So doing inner child work, inner child healing can help you to break those chains. And if you feel like you don't have people that you can trust, that you can go to, that you feel safe with, that you feel like you won't be judged or you're able to be vulnerable with, if you feel like you don't have that, then start to consume content online made from people who are in a healthy space. Start to consume healthy content, happy content, uplifting content. Fill your mind with that. What will happen is that because now your mind is starting to fill with these uplifting things, there's gonna be a divide that ends up happening with your physical reality and the things that your mind is starting to absorb. And that will help to shift you, because naturally you will start to do the work to break those chains. You're no longer going to accept this environment. You're no longer going to allow it to continue, because it's not in alignment with the thoughts, the greater thoughts that you're having in your head. It's no longer in alignment with that. And so either one of two things will happen. You'll get sucked back into that toxicity if you allow it, or that toxic environment will change. You will change and you will remove yourself from it. And I hope for you that it's the second one. You will remove yourself from that environment, because you're filling your mind with all these uplifting, positive and happy people and healthy environments. Also, stop reading books with toxic relationships as the core. I understand that sometimes these books seem to be really popular and they sell and they have an allure to them, but stop reading them. They're not good for you. They're only perpetuating the toxicity in your own life, because now your mind is being trained to accept that this is okay, this is normal, it's completely okay. And oftentimes in those books, what will end up happening is that the toxic environment, it doesn't go away per se, but it's like things change, or something shifts and blah blah blah. Like, they make it seem like they glorify the toxicity, but in reality, that's not how it works. That toxicity is only going to continue to hurt you. It's not going to go away. If somebody's being toxic to you, if somebody's hurting you, it's not going to magically poof and disappear. You need to remove yourself from that. I understand that there is a massive allure to these books, and many people love it. These stories, these movies, whatever. It doesn't have to just be books, but this type of content, this toxic relationship content, there's a huge allure to it. But is it actually helping? Do you really think that that toxic relationship is going to play out how it played out in that story or in that movie? Most likely not. More than likely, you're just going to end up being in this, and it's just going to get worse and worse, and you're going to be more hurt. So stop consuming that content and remove yourself to the best of your ability from that environment and break those chains. Something I find to be really helpful is making a list of all the reasons why you believe this environment to be toxic. And once you have clarity on that, start to search out content that is the complete opposite to that. So for example, if you believe this environment to be toxic because people are constantly cursing at each other and getting into fights, then start to consume content where people never curse at each other, where they communicate clearly, calmly, and they're able to peacefully resolve their issues. Start to consume content like that. And create such a divide between your physical environment and the stuff that you're consuming in your mind, because your mind will start to draw you physically into the space where it's healthy. You'll physically start to shift away from that toxic environment, because you're no longer, again, consuming that and making it the forefront of your mind. I know this one can be a little bit tricky. Affirmations are incredibly powerful, but if you don't believe them, they won't work, right? So if you're in the thick of a toxic environment, telling yourself that you're not in a toxic environment, that you're in a healthy environment, is not going to work. Your mind, you will clearly see that that's not the case. So in those situations, the best thing to do is start to tell yourself that yes, this environment is toxic, but I'm no longer available for this, and I'm removing myself from it. I'm slowly, every single day, through the work I do, removing myself from this environment. Saying that will be not only much more believable to your mind, but also not create this falseness, because you're not lying. You are actually slowly but surely moving yourself away from that toxic environment through the work that you're putting in. It's much more believable, and so you'll actually be able to put that emotion into it and fuel it. You'll fuel it and feel it. Lastly, start to up-level by reading and filling your mind with books that will solve your issues or your problems. So for example, when you make that list of why you feel like you're in a toxic environment, also add why you feel you can't break from this. What chains are holding you to this? So if, like my grandma, that chain was financial, start to read books on finances. Start to become financially savvy. Learn as much as you can on different ways to up-level your finances. And there are no excuses to this. If you say you don't have the money to buy the books, these books are available online for free. I'm sure you have internet access to where you can at least find the book online. I think in the world we live in, there is no way that you can say you can't do it. The only limitations that exist are the limitations you place on yourself. So if you believe you can't do it, then you won't be able to. But just know that the excuse of not having enough money to purchase the books is false, because these books are online for free. You don't even need to download them. You can literally read them online free. You can find the audiobooks online for free. And you'll be able to learn and to have that content available to you. And if you cannot find books, just watch videos on it. There's millions and millions of videos on YouTube on finances, on up-leveling your finances, on all these sorts of subjects. So there's no way you can convince yourself that the resources aren't out there. If you want to find the resources to break the chains, you will find them. I know that was a little tough love too. Somebody needs to hear this, and I wish that I had this video for me when I was going through my own struggles in my family and household. So here I am, I'm giving it to you. I hope this helps you. Now for the questions I most commonly get asked during my coaching calls with clients. I already answered one of them, how to respond to insults. You don't respond, you pull your energy away, you pretend like they didn't say it, and if it triggers you, explore the trigger. Another question I get, like, how do I do this inner work? Well, just to briefly sum that up, how do you do outside work, external work? If you had to clean your room, how are you going to clean it? It's similar to that. Internal work is just like external work, but inside. You're cleaning your mind, you clean your diet, you change things up. That's inner work. You explore the triggers. You know, if you had a pile of trash, you're gonna look through it, or a pile of whatever, you're gonna look through it and throw the trash away, and you know, maybe you have clothes in there that you need to put in the laundry, whatever. You get the idea. So that's like, inner work is like that. You would sift through all the stuff that you have, but the way to do this is by sitting with yourself without distractions, so you can actually become open and available to all the thoughts and whatever comes up. Another question I get most commonly is how to stay grounded in your energy in these environments. So again, spending time with yourself, you have to learn to become okay and comfortable in your own presence in order to be able to stay grounded. Because if you're not comfortable in your own presence, you're not going to be able to stay grounded in these situations. And then reminding yourself that you have put in so much effort and so much investment in yourself. You're no longer available to drop yourself down. If you keep reminding yourself of that, it'll be a little bit easier to stay grounded. And along with that, you have to spend time with yourself without distractions. How do you remove toxic or unhealthy people from your life? You just remove them. You just decide to remove them. You decide that I am no longer available to spend so much of my energy on this person. And through that decision, you slowly start to take steps to remove yourself from their presence. Especially with families, I feel it's a little bit harder when you have like something chaining you down, but you can take your energy back. You can slowly start to remove your energy, mental energy, your emotional energy. Stop investing it in those people. Start investing it in yourself. Pull that back and put it on you. What does that look like practically? That looks like if somebody wants to go out, let's say, and you don't want to hang out with them. Instead of making it about them, ask yourself, would I feel good if I went out with this person? Would I actually want to hang out with this person? Do I actually want to spend time with this person? If the answer is no, then you simply tell them no, thank you. This is sort of a deeper question because it will also depend on the situation. But generally speaking, once you make that decision that you are no longer available to invest your energy and time into them, but you take your energy back and invest it in yourself, you'll start to see the path on how you can reduce the amount of time you spend with that person. And eventually you may decide that you need to just cut them off. That might be a decision you have to come to. But, making that decision first that you are no longer available to keep investing your energy into them, that you're no longer available for that toxic individual or that unhealthy individual. is the first step. How to stay away from drama. I get this all the time. How do I stay away from drama? I feel like, the people in my family, they just keep wanting to drag me into their drama, into their stories, into their chaos, and I don't know how to say no. I don't know how to back away from it, or I feel rude if I don't listen, or if I don't give my input, or I feel like I'm being hurtful if I tell them that, I don't like to talk about these things. You're going to have to become comfortable setting those boundaries. And secondly, if you just simply not responding, just giving a and pulling that energy away from it, eventually a person's going to understand that, hey, I'm not getting what I usually get, or I'm not getting what I want out of this person, so I'm not going to talk to this person about this stuff. I'm not going to talk to them about the drama and the chaos. I'll find somebody else. Usually that person will realize it, because they're looking for some type of reaction. And that's why they're coming to you, because you've been giving them that reaction. Because maybe on some deeper level, you, for whatever reason, are attracted to that drama. Maybe it's because you feel that's the only way you can talk to this person, and you want to have their company in your life. You want to be in their circle, so you're okay with their drama and listening to that and feeding into it. There's so many reasons why you may be attracting that into your life, but the bottom line is that you're going to have to be comfortable setting those boundaries. And if you just stop engaging in it, you stop reacting to it, you stop responding, the person's going to pull back, because they're going to realize they're not getting what they need out of you. And you have to be okay with that, because if you're not okay with that, then you're going to start feeling like they're not talking to you, or you're not in the loop anymore, and that will just bring that drama right back, because you're going to start to look for ways to be part of that loop. And the last question I get a lot is, what if I love the people in my family or in my environment who are toxic and unhealthy? And I kind of answered this in the beginning. You can still love somebody and have love for that person, and still recognize that they're a toxic or unhealthy individual that you don't want in your life. You can let them go with love. You don't need to hate them or have like a grudge against them. You can still love them, and you can still support them when and if they choose to better their lives. But you can also recognize that you love yourself too. And are you really going to sacrifice your life and your energy for that person? That's a decision you have to make. But it is possible to love somebody and understand that they're not healthy, that they're toxic, that you don't want them in your life. And that with peace and love, you're going to allow them to move on their way, and you're going to move on in your way. Alright, that video is super long. That's all I have for this. If you want to dive deeper into this, then you're going to need to book a coaching session with me, because this topic can go really deep, and it's changed my life just doing this type of work. I really wanted people to have this blueprint, this guide to go off of, because I wish I had it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section, and I will answer them in the next video. And I'm sending you lots of love and light. I'll catch you in another video. Bye.